When you stop and think about it, how many of your daily interactions with your partner depend on how well you can judge what they're feeling? Perhaps you made a comment that, unknown to you, touched too close to a sensitive nerve. At the time, you didn't realize how much it hurt as your partner's reaction didn't give you an obvious clue about how it made them feel. Only some hours later does your partner make it clear that what you said was deeply biting and painful. According to Simon Fraser University's Megan Giroux and colleagues, it is essential that we quickly and accurately identify others' emotional states with little interference because emotion recognition is fundamental to social interaction. Learning how to make those judgments could help you avoid such potentially awkward moments in the future, not only with your partner, but with others you'd like to get along with, or at least impress with your social prowess. Hindsight in emotional judgments. In the case of that insensitive comment of yours, as it becomes clear that it did offend your partner, do you now admit to them that you knew it was the wrong thing to say? If what Giroux et al. Call the hindsight bias is in operation, you'll give yourself credit for showing empathy that you did not, at the time, actually show. This won't help you modulate your behavior in future situations because you'll still be giving yourself a retrospective pat on the back for being so emotionally intelligent. Thus, in hindsight, you revise your interpretation of a situation that already occurred to be consistent with its actual outcome. Typically, hindsight is regarded as a phenomenon people use to provide backward confirmation of their predictions, saying you knew that your favorite team would lose once you found out they lost. In emotional hindsight, you similarly are unable to ignore what you later find out to be the way someone felt when you reconstruct the situation at a later point. In the case of that potentially insensitive comment, you'll forget that you ever worried about it at all. The emotional hindsight bias is more than just a quirk of the mind, it can also disable your ability to learn from past mistakes. There are times, especially in close relationships, when it's important to know that you're wrong so you can set things straight moving forward. Testing emotional hindsight in the lab. To test the limits of emotional hindsight in the lab, the Simon Fraser University researchers conducted a series of 5 experiments, all of which involved having participants judge the emotional expression of computer-generated images of faces. These faces represented a range of emotions from negative to positive. Importantly, within each emotion, the early images in each series were so blurry as to be almost indecipherable. Gradually, they become easier to see until it was obvious which emotion they were expressing. Throughout the series, the experimenters presented participants with a probe to find out if they could guess the emotion. After a small distractor task, participants then had to signify the point at which they had been sure of the emotion represented on the face. If hindsight was in operation, they would say they were sure earlier than they had during the initial emotion guessing task. Their aha moment would therefore have been later in reality than it was in retrospect, indicating that the participant essentially forgot how confused they were at first. Across the experimental studies, all of which were conducted on undergraduate participants, the authors manipulated various factors to tease out such influences as the amount of bias within each of the 5 emotions, plus a 6th, ambiguous, condition. At the end of the series, it became evident that hindsight bias indeed was in operation, but not consistently across emotions. When it came to negative emotions, participants clearly fell into the trap of overestimating the accuracy of their initial guesswork. They thought they correctly guessed the emotion earlier than they actually had. However, and somewhat surprisingly, hindsight didn't occur in judgments of happiness, or as the author stated, there is something unique about happy faces that precludes hindsight bias. In interpreting this result, the authors suggested 2 possibilities. One is that people react quickly and accurately to positive emotions on the face due to a happy face advantage. If you're primed to see happiness in the faces of the people you interact with, especially your closest romantic partner, you'll assume that this is indeed what they're feeling. The second possibility is that when it comes to negative emotions on the face, people just take longer to decide that the person they're seeing is angry, scared, or disgusted. When they go and think back on the event, though, they have more room to show hindsight bias because they were so inaccurate to begin with. Improving your hindsight can help your foresight. The good news about the study's findings is that the chances are good you'll quickly and correctly gauge your partner's reactions if the emotion in question is happiness. There's no need for hindsight bias if you're able to see right away that your partner thinks you're amusing and fun. When it comes to negative emotions, where hindsight bias is in full effect, the stakes are far higher. The next time you're in a similar situation, it's important to be honest with yourself as you think back on what cues you missed in your partner's reactions. Take a careful read of the effect your words and actions have, and when it turns out that you made a grave mistake, admit it. Use this as a teachable moment for yourself, especially since it would appear that it does take longer to draw the right conclusion from faces that are expressing a negative emotion. If you are making your partner unhappy, you need to know this right away. Unlike the experimental situation of the Giroux et al. Participants, moreover, in real life, you have the opportunity to take a deliberate emotional read of a situation before it escalates. Being honest will help you avoid taking credit where credit is not due. To sum up, learning from your experiences with face processing is a valuable process. As you do, you'll become that much more accurate and adept in navigating the emotional landscape of interpersonal relationships.